Outreach is underwritten by the generous support of Munter Enterprises. Family owned and operated since 1972, integrity is important, as our family name is on every project. Our word is our bond. Munter Enterprises. Just built.
Welcome back, everyone. Boy, we got a good interview here. You talk about creativity, you talk about art. You talk about art as language. There's a book that my guest, Wanda Burch, wrote called The Home Voices Speak Louder Than the Drums. Wait till you hear the story behind this book, and then how it inspired her to find these letters written from these soldiers during the Civil War, and how that inspired John, who's a singer-songwriter, John Kenosian, to write songs that were really part of the story that you found in your research.
Yes.
Wow. Not every interview is like this, Wanda, I'm telling you. So welcome, both of you. It's great to have you here.
Thank you.
Nice to be here.
You went into a bookstore one day.
I did, in Savannah, Georgia, picked up a book of Georgia's soldiers' letters, and I opened it at random, and I saw a man's words, Henry Graves, on the battlefield, Petersburg, Virginia, and he wrote that there are several angels of mercy for the soldier on the battlefield. One is hope, one is the imagination, and the second real angel of mercy is the night dream. And he proceeded to describe a dream that was so evocative and so real about walking through an arbor and picking oranges from a tree, and then being with the woman that he loved and picking her up by the waist and laying beside her in the soft cheek of her cheek next to his rough beard, and then a twig woke him up, and he woke up startled and wondered where she was. And he said that that dream was more real than any dream he had ever had. I flipped through the book and I found others. And over the next 10 years, I found hundreds of thousands of letters, all of them with dreams in them, all of the soldiers saying that their dreams were more real on the battlefield than any night dream they had ever had.
Well, you know what? You think about social media. That was the social media of the time.
It was.
But I think even more important than that is think about the stress and just what it was like to be in the battlefield then. The casualties, the stress, the sounds and everything else. You know, what did they have, these soldiers? They had their dreams, and they had the ability to write. But then you went one step further, which I find absolutely fascinating, I'm sure you will too, is that she went on to find out more about the people who authored those dreams or those letters, right?
Oh, absolutely. You have to. You have to get to know them. You get to know where they are, who they're writing to, how many children they have, and you discover that those families are writing back to them, and they're also dreaming with them, including their children. Some of these soldiers are asking their children to come inside their dreams with them so that they can see them, or they're flying in their dreams to the side of their loved ones, and it's real. These are very real situations, and then the families write back and they see them. They see them there, and they share information back and forth.
Think about that. Think about that kind of intimacy or that kind of connection, right? Wow. In some cases, as you were describing, it wasn't always a happy ending.
No, no. There is a time when a dream can become a nightmare, when what is you're experiencing mentally and physically leaves you so barren and with so much soul loss that something else begins to happen. And in fact, there was a doctor in that period named Joseph DaCosta, and he was the first person to give it a name that I can identify with. He didn't call it PTSD or shell shock.
Right. Sure, we didn't,
he called it soldier's heart, because he discovered that the soldier's heart beats differently, permanently beats differently to a rhythm that is almost not defined. And that reflects what's going on in their mind and their body, and that's hard to come back from. So there are letters to home and from home about that condition as well. So nothing has changed in our centuries and centuries of war.
Boy, is that right. John's, you're a singer-songwriter. Just in case you were looking for a little inspiration, and Moon in June was already taken. What was it like to come across, to have this conversation with Wanda, and then realize that I've got to put this to music?
I met Wanda in the studio actually, and we got to talk. And her husband plays in the other band with us. And when I read some of her books, she actually gave me the first copy of this book, and it weighed about 450 pounds. It really did. And I started reading it, and she was telling me some stories. I said, geez, I've got to write some music to this. And 15, 20 minutes later, these songs started coming out.
Yeah. Now, we have a real treat for everybody, because at the end of the program today, John is going to perform one of the songs from the letters that you, one of the letters that you have in the book,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Yeah. Just roughly, what is the story of that letter?
It's a particularly evocative one. It's the story of Addie Case and Charlie Tenney. Both of them lived in Mecca, Ohio. Charlie's going off to war, and he has a family that's not quite so supportive, so he asks Addie to write to him. She does. They exchange some letters, and she says, I'll write to you as a sister, and you write to me as a brother, and he says, fine. And then he says, after a while, I'm writing to you as a lover. And she says, no, no. And then another couple of letters, and she says, yes, as a lover. So they fall in love. But the sad part of this begins almost immediately, because she begins to have incredible dreams of his death. And she shares them with him. And she's absolutely terrified. And he says, no, I feel confident that I'm not going to die on a battlefield. And she said, no, you aren't. You're going to die on a hospital bed. Years go by, 1861, when they began writing letters. In 1863, the Battle of Harper's Ferry, he has gotten sick, and he does not tell her. And then he has to tell her. And she is beside herself, because her dreams are getting more and more and more terrifying. At Bolivar Heights, there's a church, and there's a hospital that's been set up for the soldiers in the church. And on the night of January 17th, she dreams the most frightening dream yet. She dreams that she is in a hospital, and she's walking through the hospital, and she rises from this dream. She literally feels herself lifting, and she's shoving her way through men in the hospital who've died, and they're rising from their beds, and they're trying to get her attention, but she's not interested in them. She's shoving her way through, and she's looking for Charlie. She finally sees him, and he's on a cot on a bed of straw, and she kneels down beside him, and he lifts his head, and he says, have you come?
And that was the night that he passed away.
He passed away, but it's also the night that she penned her letter in and put it in an envelope, and she mailed it, not realizing that he had died.
Right.
So on the night of his death, her letter crosses with his death.
Well, I can't wait to hear this song, John. This is something. Thank you both very much for coming in. This is just a terrific interview, and just think about the stories. Think about how time means nothing, really. And the dimension that we live in is probably a very shallow dimension when it comes to these kinds of things, and the connections that we do have, and probably the connections we'll find out about later on too, right?
Yes.
Well,
yes.
By the way, we didn't even get to this. I'm going to explain this in the news story, okay?
Okay.
But they perform, both Wanda and John perform, and I'm going to tell you about where they're going to perform. But and stick around, because John's going to play at the end of the show. But thank you both very much for coming in. Very nice to meet you.
Thank you so much.
Thank
You're
you.
quite welcome. To see this interview again, you can head to our website, looktvonline.com.